Anytime we're taking impressions for indirect restorations where we plan on using models, we want to have a bite registration. And so a lot of people will say, well, hey, I use this because it's faster and easier to capture the impressions and a bite registration at the same time. Yes, it does all that. However, it does have a lot of flaws and drawbacks, and we'll talk about that. I see other people taking something like this where they take a bite registration of the entire arch, which can also create many problems, and we'll talk about that. But for now, I want to talk about taking a bite registration of just the teeth you're working on. That's 1 tooth, 2 teeth, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever the number is. A bite registration that captures just the teeth you're working on and the opposing. That's all I care about. So once you've captured that, the next thing you want to do is you want to remove all of the excess material so that you only have the cusp tips and the opposing preparation design. So again, just a flat table of preparation design and cusp tips. The reason we want that is because all the fissures and sluiceways potentially are going to be incorrect because the model may have some inaccuracies in it. So we really only want to capture the cusp tips because we know they're typically going to be clean and the least flawed, as opposed to the little fissures may have bubbles or porosities or other issues in there that might not allow this to seat as best as possible. So the first thing we want to do with these is we want to trim away all the excess. I'm typically using 2 different types of bite registration material for my indirectly fabricated restorations. Now the first one is the polyvinyl siloxane material like O-Bite from DMG. I'm utilizing this for my 1 or 2 unit everyday restorations. And the reason I'm utilizing this is because it sets up quickly in 1.5 minutes. It's easy to get in and out of undercuts, and I can use a scalpel to quickly trim away any excess and send it all off to the lab. Okay, so having used a scalpel, we trimmed away all the excess such that you can just see the preparation design and a little bit down the axial walls. I don't care if it touches the adjacent teeth, so I've trimmed that away also. And then on the chewing surface of the opposing dentition, there's just tiny cusp tips, and that's all that remains. So having done this, I want a bite registration material that is firm, that doesn't have a lot of flexibility or bend or give, so that under compression it doesn't squish. For the same token, I like something that carves very easily and doesn't tear or break when I try to cut through it with a scalpel. Having already mounted the upper cast utilizing a face bow or hinge axis, we then take the bite registration material that we've trimmed and we can now mount the opposing model. So that's going to line things up for us. And now we can rubber band this into place so that we can mount the lower member to the articulator. Having mounted the models using the bite registration material, we realize that this is still not as accurate as it could be. So the next thing we're going to need to do is remove all of the model work that is not a prepared tooth so that we can set the pin. So we're going to go ahead and take out each of the non-prepared teeth, leaving just the prepared teeth, or in this case, the prepared tooth behind. We're going to then place the bite registration back onto the model work. We're going to close the articulator down. Okay, so now we're back to utilizing the bite registration. So we're going to set the incisal pin at this point. So to set the incisal pin, what we're going to want to do is loosen this screw here. And it's different on each articulator, but still very comparable. We're going to hold the pin. We want this to be passive. So you can tap on it, make sure it's seated all the way, but we're not trying to force it. We're then just going to tighten this so we've passively captured the distance between the prepared tooth or teeth and the opposing model. Now in the mouth, this is the only thing we know. So taking a bite registration gives you the exact distance between the prepared teeth and the opposing teeth. And because they're captured passively, meaning there's no pressure on the teeth in the mouth when you capture this, this is the only known entity we have when we're doing model work. Because let's face it, there's distortion in models when we pour them up and when we mount them. So this is the only thing we know. So by setting the pin, we now have taken this known entity and we've captured that, and we're going to maintain it. Now me personally, I have 2 little rubber stoppers here that I go ahead and push up so the pin can't move either. If they're sort of come loose, I have a marking that at least shows me where I started, or I can always go back and utilize the bite registration again. So we're trying to be as accurate as possible so that we have the least amount or no adjustments on the day of delivery, but maintaining good occlusion. We don't want to deliver something necessarily out of occlusion either. So we've set the occlusion here as far as the pin, which is dictating the distance between the prepared teeth and the opposing. So it's at this point, if we were to go ahead and actually remove the bite registration, we have a distance between teeth that is captured and known. Now for the same token, I've got this on a split cast. For the same token, there's nothing touching them. So if I were to take a piece of 8 micron shim stock, I can't pull it out from the incisal pin, just from the weight of the pin itself, okay? If I pull hard enough, I can get it to come out, but basically it's stuck, it's being held in place, okay? So that gives us a lot of information saying that, hey, at 8 microns, this distance is set. Now, if we add the model work back in, and I'm going to add the lower Pindex model on first, just so the upper model has something to rest on. Since it's Pindexed down here, it's easy to replace, and the upper is a split cast just for purposes of demonstration. I don't normally split cast for doing indirect restorations. And so at this point, we put all the model work back in. The bite registration is gone because we captured it with the pin at this point. Now what I want you to see is this is passive now, right? I can drag it right underneath. It's not stopping like it was earlier. So what that tells me basically is that the model work is inaccurate because I set the pin on the only thing I knew, and now the models, which have some slight distortion in them, or because of the mounting process, they are slightly off. Not by a lot, but maybe 40 microns, 50 microns. That's a potential large adjustment in the mouth that I don't want to have to do, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to equilibrate the models, and we're going to equilibrate them down until this actually is captured, and passively closing the articulator, I can't pull it out. So the next thing we need to do is we need to equilibrate our models. So I typically like to use a Occlude spray. And so with this spray, what we're going to do is we're going to spray the opposing model. Now, having done this, when we close the articulator down, it's going to leave marks. And wherever those marks are, we're going to have to take those away. So I'm going to go and equilibrate those marks now. So now that the models have been equilibrated, we're able to actually prove that if we just close the articulator down onto the 8 micron shim stock, that we can't pull this out, that we're back to actually having that tension. So a level of 8 microns of accuracy has been proven utilizing the interocclusal record, the bite registration that we took of the passively captured teeth, the prepared tooth or prepared teeth, and the opposing teeth. That is the only entity we know when we take it out of the mouth that is the distance we can work with. The model work, as I've shown, can be slightly irregular because of porosities and little positives and or distortion of plasters and stones. So we equilibrate it so that we actually can have very accurate indirect restorations that provide us little to no adjustment at delivery. Now that you understand the concept of why we take a bite registration to mount models onto an articulator, the same holds true for these closed bite. Okay? For this, you have the same level of inaccuracy of having something between the teeth, so you have this distance that is captured both passively and actively in this material. So when they bite down and squeeze, the teeth are actually moved. However, the tooth that's been prepared and the tooth opposing it have not. So there's still inaccuracies in here. But also when you put this onto one of the disposable articulators, it's not on a hinge. So depending on how thick this is, when you take this out between the models and close the articulator down, you're going to be on a different pathway. And so that right there is going to have some inaccuracies. So if I were to do something like this, I will always take a bite registration. And the reason I take that bite registration is the same as this, except we can utilize this on a small articulator that has an incisal pin. Now I know most of the disposable articulators they use don't have incisal pins, However, there are small devices that they can reuse that have incisal pins where they can set the pin utilizing a byte registration for a closed byte tray system. And it can do the exact same thing we've shown here.